Professor Ved Kumari, ma'am, thank you for joining us today. It's so lovely to have you. We're sorry for the wait. We're running a little behind schedule, but thank you so much for making time for us. Ma'am, let me open with a question to you on, like Bhavna said, you've written extensively on criminal law, juvenile justice. What we hear generally today is that, when we are talking about and for women, we almost are sort of driving the men into believing that all laws in India today are anti-men. So, what would be your thoughts on if you could just clarify on certain things on why that mentality is growing? We're just only trying to change things for the gender that's been suffering for a while now. But what would be your thoughts on getting everyone on the same boat?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to be here. And I'm glad that you asked the questions which trouble a lot of people, both men and women. And my first take is that with what we consider as pro-woman law are actually not pro-woman. So if something is not pro-woman, how can it be even anti-woman, anti-men? I fail to understand. I say they're not pro-woman because even in the laws which are meant specifically for women, for example, 498A, which is the bane of all the male bashing, saying that, oh, women are misusing that law. First of all, let's get our facts correct. There are 1 in 3 women who are subjected to domestic violence, 1 in 3 married women. So that is the extent of the problem we have. Men say, oh, men also get beaten up. I would want to know what is their percentage. What is the percentage of married men who are subjected to domestic violence as a starting point of conversation. Then from there, how many of these 1/3 married women file complaints? How many of men have been prosecuted for the violence that they caused to the women? All these questions are not asked because they are very difficult questions. The questions which are asked is, oh, women are misusing the law. I do not say that no woman would ever misuse a law. Like men misuse the law, women also misuse law. But the number is so minuscule that and also what counts for misuse is also an important question to ask. A woman files a complaint and then she withdraws. It is seen that, oh, she was only trying to arm twist. But it may be that she's now trying to make the family function. For her, family is important. So if the family has turned around, or the other thing is also that the family pressure, her own natal family pressure is so great. There might be other pressures like she does not know where to live because she moved out of that violent house, went to her paternal house, and nobody is welcoming her there either. Her children are in great trouble. There may be 1,000 reasons because of which she withdraws, but we say, oh, these are all suspect cases. So certainly there would be some women, like it happens with every law, that some men also, while as we say, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So certainly, if there is a law, the possibility of misuse can't be ruled out. But that's for me, that's not the worry, because we are very far away from. But the voice is a lot more because these are women who are into the urban setting, into the educated setting, into the setting where they are comparatively more powerful. So therefore, when the women are powerful, certainly our marriages being hypogamous, they are into more powerful families. And therefore, to challenge men in those families, there is to be backlash. A poor woman abusing her husband, nobody worries about it. But if a middle-class woman, there is any misuse, so the man is even more powerful and gets the pinch a lot more. So that's not, and people in decision-making, whether they're judges, they're policemen, they are lawyers, these are people from the same strata. They can relate to it a lot more easily than they would to the agony of a poor man or a poor woman. So somewhere it resonates with us because all of us are in that scenario where we think, oh, I know my friend has been abused. I know my so and so. So all of us have experienced something of that kind at our personal level. But in all those experiences, our listening is only of one side. We do not know what is the side of other side story. So I know my cousin, I would know my uncle, I would know my bhaiya, So I would know somebody who is related to my side. I know his story. Have you even found out what is the woman's story who's making the abuse? No, quote unquote abuse. So that's one thing I think I would want to put a caution on. But my other take was that the laws which are meant to protect women are actually not protecting them. It's just a namesake category there. For example, in the definition of 498A, it says, if the conduct is such as is likely to cause grave injury to the woman or to pressurize or to lead her to commit suicide. Conduct is such. So it is not a slap here or there or taunt here or there or an insult here and there. It has to be a grave injury. So she should break her arm, she should break something, some grievous hurt should happen. Only that kind of injury is considered. But that's not what women are complaining about. Women are complaining about day-to-day violence they face in the house. There's no law to deal with that. Yeah. And what I have noted recently, because I've been looking at the law from the gender perspective, the concept of domestic violence was recognized as early as in 1930s and 1940s by the courts. But you say, no, as is the wont of the husband, they were beating their wife. As happens in most society, most families, the husband was beating. It's normalized. There is no castigation of the husbands. And that's what we want to continue thinking about 2020, 21 also. We do not want, the whole focus is what the women are doing. But what are the men doing? Have they stopped beating their wives? Thappad made such a big movie and such a controversial in my class. Every time this is a conversation, whether one thappad is enough. Yeah. And they're all focusing, oh, the woman was, some will say, no, she was right. Some will say she was wrong. None of my students say, what was the husband? Why did the husband dare to even give one thappad? That questioning is not there. The whole questioning is whether woman's conduct in that one thappad was right or not. The conversation is not whether that one thappad by the man was right or not. So I think somewhere we need to change that. And then the other thing is, if the husband gave one thappad, you also give one thappad. How can you give that one thappad? In our marriages, the marriages are hypergamous. The husband is taller, he's older, he's more educated, he's more financially sound. Everything is more. Women are never taught to give thappads, when they were children. As siblings, we do not fight. We do not use thappads and legs and fists to deal with each other. We argue. Women argue. Men beat. So they know how to use their hands and legs to kick and beat up. Women don't know. So when this husband who is taller and heavier and more body built, how can you kind of beat him up? And if you do you think you are not going to get back much more retaliation? So to say this on the spur of the moment, she should beat him up back. Does the system allow us? So I certainly think that there's a lot more critical analysis required than to just get the other one. 304B comes into operation only when the woman is no more there. Yeah, she's dead. Then what is the relief to her? 1960 we got the dowry prohibition. Till date, has it stopped? It's only increasing. Yeah. So by law we have made now women co-partners. How many women are actually claiming property? The men don't ask this question to each other, either property or brotherly love. Between two brothers, they can have partition without much problem. But a sister asks partition, you are destroying the family. So the whole attitude challenging of status quo, that no, the women should remain dependent on men. There's no effort in the law to change the structure, recognizing the work they do and putting economic worth to that work. Why every woman must go and work outside and do double duties? Why can't her work at home be recognized as economic activity of the house? Yeah. Money comes to her. If she's not spending money, she's saving a lot of money in the household and saving a lot more in terms of mental health of people. Yeah. Providing comfort to the men. Men are able to go to work on time and be happy because the woman is looking after their needs. She ensures that he leaves the house on time. Then we say, no, she should go to the work also, and also if the children are not neglected, she is working, so bachcho ko kaun dekhega? Why did you not ask that question to the husband when he goes to work? So somewhere we are not breaking away from this stereotypical division of work between men and women. In the public sphere, they should be equal. There should be no discrimination. But that is not sufficient. Last conversation, I was listening to Ms. Khetan's conversation, and the point she was making, that what do you do? How do you ensure that women are retained? Women can be retained only if you provide for childcare.
Yeah.
If the company doesn't provide for childcare, so it's not just my goodwill to this woman. I have to ensure that the family care is taken care of. And longer leaves you go for maternity leave, fewer people will take her. Even with this law which says child care leave for 2 years. So which employer would want to have women workers if they are, they will be again away for 2 years and you have to pay their salaries as well? So if they are there for making money, why would they want to employ women? So why should the law not say that when we're looking at promotions, we will want to see how much effort you put in your child care for both men and women. So maternity leave is fine because it is the body of the woman which is involved and she needs to recoup. But child care, why should it be only women? And it should be in the appraisal that if you have children, have you looked after them? What kind of a human being are you? So when we are assessing appraisals, so appraisals should have a component of human care. How much time have they devoted to human care? If they cannot take care of their own families, they cannot find time for their own families, can they care for your company? There's no emotional attachment to the people they have given birth to. Can they have attachment to the company? So I think if the company start thinking on those lines, that human worth, human care is as important, because your attachments to things comes only when you take care. So otherwise, we'll have keep on having attrition. People will come, more money, they'll go somewhere else. There's no commitment. So when we say women are taking care, women should continue to take care, we are saying women continue doing double or triple work. And then as efficient as men are. So I think the recent thing which Procter & Gamble said, I think is a good example. Share the care.
Yeah.
And they have done it across boundaries, not only limited to married couple. They're not limited to only heterosexual couples. So I think these are the kind of examples now we need to promote and think about and focus a lot more on that. Flexi timing, job sharing, all that. There are lots of examples available to ensure that the women get into the workplace on an equal footing. So criminal law is not the only area where we need intervention.
Yeah, very true.
Look at amendments in the amendments in the criminal law and rape laws. Till date, we have still said she is the sexual property of the husband.
Yeah.
From the age of 18, she cannot say she cannot say no to the husband. So she continued to be by law, treated as subservient to the man.
Yeah.
So we are far away from even normative equality. Forget about substantive equality.
Very true, ma'am. So many questions that we need to ask, which we often don't. And like you pointed out, such I've been asking throughout the day on how we course correct, and like you pointed out, if we can have a creche for children, if we can have attached responsibility, on men, how much time you spend on human care, as again saying that you want to retain women, you let them go and take care of their children. It's also about attaching responsibility on men and taking that burden from women. So thank you so much, ma'am, on those thoughts. One last thought.
Ashima, on this one also, on creche, the law says creche will be only when there are 20 or more women. Men never have children, no? So by law, we are saying when you have a job, even then you women look after the children. Till the time of breastfeeding, it's okay for them to get the breastfeeding break. That's perfectly fine. But once they are weaned away, then why should not the men also look after their children? Why should not they also take the children to the creche? Why should only the women take the children to the creche? So while creche is a good start, but not limited to women alone, na? That's why we keep on reinforcing their care role.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So many aspects that you brought to light, and that is the essence of this conversation today, that one conversation at a time. If we can change and bring winds of change, that would be our that's where our success is. So thank you so much, ma'am. In the interest of time, I'm sorry I'm not able to ask so many more questions that I have in store. I'm actually, holding myself back from asking you so many questions on notional income and other things. But unfortunately, I'm going to have to connect with you offline. So thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us today and bringing that to light on this occasion. And a very happy Women's Day to you.
Pleasure. Happy Wednesday to you also.
Thank you so much, ma'am.